From Kurtco Media.
I'm asked to take the car for a test drive on Saturday afternoon, and I take it, and clutch is working good. It starts, it goes, and as I'm bringing the car back into the shop, I see smoke coming out from under the hood.
That's never good.
Never good. And open the hood in the garage, and there was a fire in the engine compartment.
Hello, and welcome to Cars That Matter. I'm your host, Robert Ross. On this episode, I visited Joseph DeMeo at his workshop to discuss how he gets cars ready for the most important show fields in the world. Joseph is a true artist in car restoration with a reputation built on meticulous craftsmanship and an eye for unparalleled detail. In addition to his 4 wins at PCA Porsche Parade, Concours d'Elegance with the legendary Porsche Grey Ghost, Joseph has garnered numerous prestigious awards for his stunning work. His expertise spans iconic marques, bringing timeless beauty back to life in Porsches, Mustangs, Lamborghinis, just to name a few. Get ready for an insightful conversation about passion, precision, and the art of bringing automotive history back to its prime. This is Robert Ross. Welcome to another episode of Cars That Matter. I'm sitting in a toy store of sorts, quiet, out-of-the-way place with some fascinating cars and a fascinating friend. Joseph DeMeo, welcome to the episode. You're a serious player in this concours business. You know, Joseph, I'm looking at the shop here and I see everything from trophies to toolboxes to more spare parts than Carter has pills, but I see some platinum records too. Obviously, you had a different life before this one. Tell us about the transition.
Well, I had a 40-year music business career in marketing and sales at the major labels and also at a number of reasonably important independent labels. The interesting part of the transition from the music business to the car restoration business, car detail, car showing business was that there was a lot of transferable skills. I always collected cars. Even as a kid, I would have a car. My dad and I would be fool around with the cars. And so I've always been involved with cars, whether it was the 60s with muscle cars or the 80s with, inexpensive sports cars, and until I was able to purchase my first Porsche in 1982. But it wasn't until I left the music business in about 15 years ago, maybe shortly less, that I focused all my attention on my car passion. And I went from a, car and a half, 2-car garage to a 20 cars on the ground here and another 12 cars in a storage hangar not too far away. I would have never imagined, even 15 years ago, that I would have back-to-back cars on the lawn at Pebble Beach.
Well, that really is something, and obviously quite a transition from hobbyist to a full-time practitioner of a very, very rare and specialized art. All of these cars, with the exception of a few that you own yourself, are project cars, client cars, and as you say, they'll eventually end up on a show lawn somewhere. As I understand it, your goal is to turn these into cars that are the prime exemplars of their particular mark and model.
Yes, I like to bring these cars, all the cars that I work on, irrelevant of its mark or model, Toyota, Mustang, Buick, Lamborghini, Porsche, to the closest as I can bring them to what they were originally, or better, specifically to compete on the concours show field. So to that end, the objective is not as simple as make it a original car or make it a clean car or make it a shiny car. It's the idea that you're going to be scrutinized, that you're going to be looked at and criticized and judged, and that preparing these cars to be looked at, to be judged, and win is really what the my philosophy is. It's lofty, but if you're going to try and do this, you really need to go in there with the idea that you're going to build a car that will get as many points as it can, be as compelling as it possibly could be to whomever it is that's judging it. That's a specialty beyond anything that you could imagine, because it requires understanding the judging process, understanding the show environment, understanding the competition, building in your strengths and recognizing your weaknesses, because all cars have weaknesses. I've oftentimes received a 100-point score, but that doesn't mean that the car was perfect. It was just one of those days, right?
Well, it does have a lot to do with the judges, and there's so much research and so much background that has to go into the quote unquote curation of a car. Joseph, what are the biggest challenges of making a car a perfect 10?
Well, first you have to start with a good car. Okay, and then you have to understand the way cars are compartmentalized: their interior, their paint, their engine, their driveline, their trim, and then you have to evaluate the car and see what it needs to be brought up to its maximum judging potential. Some cars are simpler than others. Some cars you require a good cut and polish, maybe some gap adjustments. It's a little bit of trim bright work here or there, a lot of essential detailing, because the base operation of my philosophy is cleanliness, because I learned my concourse chops in the PCA
Oh, they're
Porsche
they're
Club.
they're the most medieval on the planet. You'll get the person with the smallest little pinky to put their finger underneath that wiper blade, and if anything comes off, or
Mhm.
under a rear deck lid lip, and then the party's over.
Correct. So I have been and continue to be very successful in the PCA, and so my skills at preparation and presentation, based on this immaculate philosophy that the PCA burned into my mind, is the basis for me doing anything, is to immaculately clean whatever I have, and then step back and look at where I can improve, how I can improve, only to the level and degree that I can uniformly improve. Because as soon as you go beyond in one place, obviously it degrades from the others, right?
It's like restoring a house, I guess, when you paint the place and it looks great, but all of a sudden the old hardware on the hinges and doorknobs just sticks out like a sore thumb. Everything has to balance. And that brings about another question, the philosophical one about originality. When is a survivor car not worth preserving?
Well, let's first take my experience with survivor cars, unrestored, preservation class cars. Okay, the best example that I've worked with is a 1965 Corvette. It's a roadster. It's a very simple silver and black car. And the 65 Corvette that I care for and show is an extraordinary example of an original car. Now, the fact that this car has been scrutinized extensively by the NCRS, National Corvette Restorers Society, multiple winner of their heralded Bloomington Gold. But more importantly, it's one of very few cars that's ever won the Zora Duntov Award, which is essentially validating its originality. Now, when I see this car, when I first look at it, I say, that's great that Zora Duntov liked it. I said, but there's a lot of stuff here that I would say certainly wasn't the way it was from the factory. Okay. So here's where your willingness to improve something that's already so-called perfect comes into play. So I looked at this car and I said, I don't like the way the door jambs are finished. I don't like some of the way that the paint is finished behind places that weren't sandable. I didn't like a lot of the overall finish of the paint because it was dirty. It wasn't properly curated, whether it was original or not.
That's factory dirt sprayed right in.
Right. So you have to be careful. But nonetheless, I chose to improve the car. I chose to do a little bit of dusting of some paint in a gusset, or replate something, or take the exhaust headers off and blast them and do them in a kind of a neutral shade of electroless nickel or something. And these things were done consciously, in spite of the fact that they might have been considered improving the car or changing the originality of it. Because I believe that my vision of the originality is better than the version of what whomever was judging it was. And I felt that they would not be offended by, or for that matter, even notice that I had made these changes.
Because really, we're looking at these things through the lens of the 21st century. It's important to understand that a Model T Ford was, black and looked like a dump truck when it came off the line back in its day. But and frankly, so did so many Italian cars, for instance, from the 60s. Their craftsmanship and the level of fit and finish was not very good in some cases. Panel gaps were atrocious. Paint was mediocre at best. And those are things that you like to address.
Sure, I don't see any fault in improving. Okay, if you were to look at the cars that win Pebble Beach, they were never as nice as they were when they won that award, ever. Unless, of course, it's something like this preservation car that they granted the Best of Show to last year, which required no perfection whatsoever. Just its existence was apparently enough. Everything else that you've ever seen go over that dais there was way better than anything they ever did to that car when it was new. So you have to take that as your standard, right? You have to say, okay, for instance, many of those cars were repainted different colors,
That's
okay,
right.
and still won the award. So that gives you a little bit of breathing room when it comes to taking a car that maybe isn't a good color, that you believe if it was changed, you would have a better shot at winning, you know? And so you have to take from experiences of others and apply it to your decision making on any level of car that you're going to, whether it's a preservation car, whether it's a barn find car, whether it's a full restoration car. You have to understand the room that you have to move, and you have to use it confidently.
So clearly, this is not just science, it's art. But you pointed out, Joseph, that the cars that generally take Best of Show, that these are all cars that have been restored from the ground up. These are bare metal restorations. How long does it take to do that? And what kind of pitfalls come your way? What kind of surprises come your way along
It's
the way?
interesting, for instance, that 66 Mustang. It took a year. It was a complete restoration. Car was completely taken apart. All the drivetrain, underbody, paint, all the mechanisms were done on it. But it was fast because it was largely straightforward.
And they made over 1 million Mustangs, so clearly parts are
Right,
plentiful.
parts were readily available, and so you could move forward pretty quickly and confidently restoring a car like that and expect that in a year, unless you came up with some problems, you might be able to have a finished car. And then in that case, we did. And that car is restored in 2014, and when you look at it, it's as good as it was, if not better than the day that we finished it, because these cars are constantly coming back to me to be refurbished or refreshed or improved.
Because
Because
the owner may take it on the road or may like
oh
to actually
yes,
use the
yes,
car.
yes, yes. Now back to your original question about a time, and let's take this '64 Lamborghini.
So let's set the stage here. This car was at Pebble Beach last year in the post-war sports class, and it was made quite a sensation, if for no other reason than its original color. But this car took a while to get there, didn't it?
Correct. And I'd say that the entire process was the better part of 4 years, including COVID. And this car was completely disassembled down to its bare bones. Nothing other than a chassis with an aluminum body attached to it was remaining after we disassembled it. So, and then every single component of the car had to be handled, restored, replaced, uh, rebuilt, refabricated. And the difficulties that we incurred with this car were unanticipated. What looked like a straight line to a deadline in 2023 was thrown off its rails in March of 2023 when we started to deal with the trim, the window trim, the door trim, the bumpers, the tail light bezels, the grills, on and on.
You had to make some of the stuff from scratch
Correct.
because the original pieces were so dilapidated or had been so kludged in the interim of ownership, the years. Remember, these were just old used cars for a couple of decades. They didn't get much care.
So, you do the body, and the body is beautiful, and, and you fit the doors and everything, you do your gaps, and here you have this beautiful body, and now you start to assemble the doors and the windows and the bumpers, and you find that these pieces that you kind of assumed, for better or worse, were suitable, that they would be, you could work with them. And in many cases, we found that they were completely unsuitable. You couldn't use them. They had to be, no matter what you did with them, you couldn't make them work. They weren't good enough. They had been damaged. They'd been repaired. They were fragile. They didn't have the right shape. Now you're talking about a car that, for instance, has a driver's window that has double compound curve.
Easily the most complicated side window of the 60s. Ferraris were flat, Porsche 911s were flat until 1999.
It was a shock because what followed was a solid year of focusing exclusively on the trim, which was completely inconceivable that you would have to spend that much time with multiple people. I mean, there was at least 5 people working on the trim in that year. So the whole project was pushed back a year by one component, by one set of components. Okay. I couldn't even imagine that something like that would have happened, right? And try and explain that to the customer.
Well, that's very interesting because you're not only managing the car and you're managing your associates who are actually the specialists working on these things, but you're trying to manage expectations of a client who may have no idea what it takes. He just wants to get in the car and turn the key. And those are some of the most complicated conversations I think anybody can have.
Yes, and I'm a perfectionist, for better or for worse. It's not my nature to give someone back something that doesn't satisfy me. Okay, so who's to say that maybe he would have accepted some of the things that I wouldn't have accepted, and that might have cut some of the time off of the process, but that's not even an option.
Isn't that the classic question? You know, when I was a little boy and I made model cars, I used to paint the inside of the engine blocks before I glued them together. That's simply how some people like you and I think.
Beyond that, the artistic expression or freedom that I like to exercise goes to very, very subtle things. Like when we rebuilt the bumpers, we changed the shape of the inside curve of the bumpers, which were generically stamped and cut and put on with no concern for the shape of the body. So we brought the bumper closer to the body. We made the bumper back follow the curve of the body. Very subtle.
That's hugely subtle and obviously something I noticed when I saw the car because the other example here has a standard from the quote unquote factory bumper. And frankly, from a distance of 5 feet, they look identical, but you get close on them. And the one car has a much more elegant and continuous form.
Flow, yes. And that's expressed in the bumpers. It's expressed in a lot of the internal moldings that are just reshaped a little bit to better complement what you have to work with there. It's just things that maybe some people would say would not really need to be done.
Well, clearly not, but these are judgment calls of yours that really just sort of balance out the finished product when it's sitting on the lawn.
Correct. The other thing that I do, which is kind of contrary to many people's approaches, restorers' approaches, I will, and I use this term cautiously, I'll over restore. By that, I mean I'll perfect something beyond its original finish.
Give me an example of what that would be, because I know in the restoration business or in the certainly showing a concours car, especially in clubs like the Porsche Club, that kind of originality is very, very important to the judges, and the judges typically know.
Let's take stainless steel exhaust systems on turbo Carreras. When they were new, they were extruded stainless steel. They had a particular finish on them. They were uniform. They were clean. They had no oxidation. They didn't have any heat cycles.
Because then they turn color. All of a sudden, you end up with a blue exhaust and not a silver exhaust.
Worse than that, you end up with a partially rusted exhaust. You end up with a stained exhaust. You end up with a lot of things that can happen to an exhaust pipe through the course of time that are just what happened to the exhaust pipe, right? So exhaust systems for me are so important that over the years, I came up with a process of curating stainless steel exhaust systems that at one point in the process has the exhaust system looking almost too perfect. Perfect enough that it could be accepted for the best it could possibly be. But the reason I brought it up that far is so it can come back. That's the method to my madness, is that oxidation, heat cycles, environment, they will all have an effect on this piece of steel, this piece of stainless steel. And I want the piece of stainless steel to get more beautiful as it ages rather than run away from you, rather than degrade. So in order to do that, you have to go a little bit beyond so you have some room to come back. My exhaust systems on my turbo Carreras and any 911 for that, they're just simply the best, and no one can understand how it's done, which is fine. I can tell them exactly how I did it, and they can try and do it, and good luck.
You know, Joseph, we talked about cars like this Lamborghini, and I see a Ferrari, and I see a couple of fantastic little Oscar Roadsters, a very rare Fiat, but I do see a sea of Porsches. Tell us about your Gray Ghost.
The Gray Ghost is the car that I largely, honed my skills on. I purchased it in 2000. It's a 1986, and
That's a turbo.
turbo, yes, an 86 turbo, 911 turbo, 3.3 liter, 4-speed. And I purchased it in 2000. It was 1986, but essentially a used car. And at that time, it was a rather high mileage used car in that it had 130,000 miles. And for the same money that I paid for it, I could have bought a low mileage Carrera. And I said, I think it'd be more fun to have this turbo. So I bought this car and I drove it. It had 130,000 miles on it. I drove it every day. And one year I wanted to take it to Pebble Beach, just drive it to Pebble Beach. And one thing led to the other, and I was introduced to a fellow's name was Bill Larzalier,
That's right, noted for his detailing.
one of the most important detailers, of all times. And I became friends with him, and he helped me work on my car. And I learned a lot of tricks from Bill, and I saw how he did it. And I was intimidated with the cars at his shop at first. And then I realized that he said to me once, "Don't worry about it, they're just cars." And it freed me up to be a little bit more liberal about the way I handled the cars, the way I acted around them. And same with my own car. I became far more willing to take things apart and experiment and improve. And over about a year and a half, in 2002, 2001, after I bought the car, Bill had helped me prepare the car for its first concours, which was a PCA, a Zone 8 event, which I had no idea what that was all about. And we took it to the Calamigos Ranch in September of 2003, and the car won with what I could consider today a abysmal score, but it still beat the next car in the class. And the event had all of the trimmings of a major event where we worked to the late of the night, and Ed the tow guy came in the morning and got the car at the sunrise and brought it to the Calamigo Ranch. And I thought this was like, the thing. This is what this whole idea was about, this struggle to work with to the last very minute and get this car there. And yes, I can show you right here the first trophy I ever won, right? And subsequent to that, I won in Zone 8 over 100 shows, 4 regional championships.
And what makes that remarkable even more so, Joe, is that, this is a car with, 150,000 miles on it. This is not a new car. This is not a garage queen. This is not a car that has 5,000 miles on it and it's been preserved in a time capsule for the last 30, 40, 50 years. This is a used car.
Used car.
And you
Exactly.
brought it back.
Exactly. And the goal in PCA would be to win the National Concours Championship at what's held once a year at what's called the Porsche Parade. Bill Larzalier would constantly say to me, "Oh, you're winning all these local shows. That's great, but the real test of your medal will be the parade." So I keep curating the car, and here comes 2007, and the Porsche Parade San Diego, which is close enough. So I cleaned the car up, I put it on the truck, and we take it down to San Diego. And I remember when they called me to bring my car down to this secondary judging area, I didn't even realize what they were telling me. Essentially, is that I was one of the last two cars competing for this grand prize. And I was competing against a well-heeled 356 restorer from Denver, who I didn't even know at the time. Now I know who he is. But my car rolls up there, and I don't know what the procedure is, and I'm sort of feeling a little bit like a, deer in the headlights. But these people converge on the car, and I have one of these guys call me over. He's looking under the car, and he says to me, "Where did you come from?" I said, "Santa Monica." He says, "No, no, no. Where did you come from? We've never seen this car or heard of this car before." I said, "Well, it's won 4 regional championships here in the Zone 8, which is considered the concours, the concours zone." I said, "So, it was close enough, so I brought it." And he said to me, this is Pete Martelli, who was a heralded judge. He said to me, "You're coming to the banquet tonight, aren't you?" I said, "I guess I am." And I won class, I won the division, and I won the best of show in 2007 at the Porsche Parade, which was unimaginable to me. And it was further unimaginable to all of those who I had come up with, because this town has a lot of, especially back then, a lot of Porsche experts, you know, lots of concours experience, lots of restoration experience. And I was just a, guy working out of a little shop in Chatsworth on my own car. My car had 150,000 miles on it. And here I show up and win this championship.
And how many parades have you won?
I've won 4. I've won in 7, 9, 14 in Monterey. And then I took the car to Palm Springs in 23 and won my 4th. No one's ever done that. History of PCA, let alone with one car.
That's a remarkable story, and a car that started out just as a driving passion of yours. Now, that to me is a car that matters. Joseph, you were talking about putting cars on the field, and it's a pretty calculated endeavor. You call the tow guy, or obviously you transport the car yourself. Everybody's working late into the night. Sometimes it's literally down to the wire to get that car on the grass. What are a couple of the most harrowing experiences you've had with a car on the field?
Well, let's go back to the most recent, which is the Pebble Beach 2024 with this 64 Lamborghini, which I will say, citing my own decision making, which put me in this under these circumstances, that in retrospect, I should have told the customer we weren't going to Pebble Beach in 2024. Today, I would be sitting in the catbird seat with a car that is ready for Pebble Beach, that would be judged to the absolute optimum score that it could possibly get, and the horrific events that happened last year at Pebble Beach wouldn't even be here to talk about. Okay. So I commit to taking this car to Pebble Beach at the behest of the customer, and we are struggling desperately when all our time is going into the trim, which is worked on up until the day that we put the car on the truck, which is the night before the tour on Thursday. Everyone but the owner is just exhausted, frustrated, not very happy. But he's happy because the car's there. So we take off on the tour. The car is not going to make the entire tour because the clutch wasn't adjusted, and small stuff that we didn't have time to do because we were so obsessed with getting the doors to fit right, trim to look right. So we take the car off the tour, and we bring it to the shop. We have a home in Carmel that has a large garage that we set up shop in, and we take the car there, and Thursday, and we start to work on it again. We're trying to fix all the little things that we can. We're having problems with the fuel system, adjusting the clutch, a lot of different little things. So anyway, we're taking care of everything that we possibly can. That's obvious. And then I'm asked to take the car for a test drive on Saturday afternoon, and I take it. And clutch is working good, it starts, it goes, and as I'm bringing the car back into the shop, I see smoke coming out from under the hood.
That's never good.
Never good. And opened the hood in the garage, and there was a fire in the engine compartment. So everyone takes a deep breath and does what they're supposed to do. They don't bring out fire extinguishers and
Oh,
destroy
no.
anything. They carefully dampen the fire, and what had happened was a fuel line leaked and dripped onto the fuel exhaust manifold and caused a fire. The fire did some cosmetic damage to things that needed to be cleaned, but what it essentially did was it burned the hood pad, a beautifully upholstered hood pad that luckily protected the paint on the exterior of the hood from being damaged by the fire. Now, there were people crying in the garage. I mean, but we take a deep breath, and my nature under circumstances like that is to be extremely calm. I don't know why, but I just sort of go into this sort of slow motion kind of thing, and I start processing the solutions, right? And by, the grace of God, I had solutions, and the solutions required, sending for parts that were here, including a believe it or not, a second hood pad that I had made and rejected earlier in the process.
All of a sudden, it's good enough. You just had to get it
You
from
gotta get it.
Los
So
Angeles
has to
up
be
to
right,
Monterey.
has to be flown down to Monterey, and then has to be put on, and then we have to figure out all the fuel, issues, and get it to the lawn that morning, which we did. Okay, which in retrospect, I can hardly imagine what it was like, and I was there. I don't even know what it was like. It just got done. Somehow or another we did. And we brought the car to the lawn, and we were judged. And the things that I didn't like about the car were completely ignored by the judges. And 4 things that were completely avoidable, we were deducted for, and thus didn't even place. I believe we scored 96, and we had a 99-point car, solid 99-point car there. But for a lack of time to test a windshield wiper, a surprising event where the tachometer didn't work that morning, a hose clamp that was claimed to be too modern, and an actual deduction, which is very interesting. We did a repair on a C-pillar after the car was painted, and the color match was beautiful. But I made a conscious decision, instead of clearing the entire roof, I was in my less is more headspace, and I had the painter, who's very talented, blend the clear. Now, beautiful color, lots of sunlight, lots of reflection. The chances of seeing this blend were very, very small. But in the judging group was a young man who was an aspiring judge, tall, obviously good eyes, and he got fixated on the shadow blend on the roof, and he would never go away from it. He kept calling people back, look at this, it's not right, it's not right. And we took a deduction for that. I'll take that deduction because, in fact, he discovered something that wasn't perfect. The others could have been mitigated with just a little bit more time.
That's right. So really, you need the time to do it right. So really, these are passion projects. I look around the shop here, and the passion's clear. I see a case full of trophies. Joseph, what's your secret to winning those trophies?
First of all, intending to win. You have to have it in your mind that your objective to go is to win, not to compete, not to be there, not to say you were accepted. You have to go there with the idea that, you're going to win. And then you have to do everything, take every advantage, every skill, every single thing that you can, imagine through experience and comparisons, and consider those things through the entire process.
That's a great philosophy. Joseph DeMeo, thank you so much for coming on Cars That Matter today, and for letting us into your inner sanctum, and sharing some of the secrets of what it takes to bring home a trophy. Deciding on the first car for your collection is a big decision, but this would be a great place to start. Ferrari. Imagine an accessible car under $100,000. Ferrari had a long tradition of building long-distance, high-speed GT cars with a V12 engine and 2+2 seating when it debuted the 456 model in 1994. It was built till 2003, so they're fairly plentiful. Its normally aspirated V12 was rated at 436 horsepower in the US, and it was available with a manual or automatic transmission. Luxurious, exotic, and a driver's GT with the unmistakable sound of a high-revving Ferrari V12, the 456 is poised to deliver all of the same thrills at a more reasonable price than the 550 and 575 Maranello models. Look for a ready-to-drive example at somewhere between $60,000 and $95,000. Thanks for listening. On my next episode, join me for a conversation with Jim Marietta. Cars That Matter is a Kurtco Media production. I'm your host, Robert Ross. The show is produced by Bill Curtis and Stuart Halperin, with audio and video production by Ness Smith-Sabadoff, and additional support from Melody Larson, Lindsay Davis, Deborah Smith, and AJ Mosley. To listen to more episodes of Cars That Matter, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you like this episode, be sure to rate us 5 stars to help other listeners discover the show. For exclusive video episodes, visit hemmings.com/carsthatmatter.
From Kurtco Media.